Module 7, Legal and Structural Formation Basics. So now that you have your pricing model, your business model, you know what you're doing, how you're doing it, at least you're starting to get that sense. It's time to start putting the appropriate structure in place. This is where you begin to protect yourself, your assets, your company, your investors, your co-founders, etc. So why does this matter? Well, first, let me start off by saying I am not a lawyer. This is not formal legal advice. You should definitely consult your lawyer or an appropriate lawyer given the scenario or the type of information that you're looking to do. What I am doing is providing a basic kind of high-level framework for what is common practice or what is generally beneficial for startups, okay? So why does structure matter? Well, it's protection and infrastructure. I am not here to introduce additional bureaucracy. You are at the startup stage as a founder, solopreneur, whatever. You're not trying to put additional red tape where it is not necessary, but you do need to protect yourself and your assets, especially if you are creating value. Oftentimes, it's very easy to overcomplicate this too early, but kind of on the same token, you can also delay it too long. So you really want to thread the needle with that sweet spot for your business. Okay, so legal structure, it affects liability, taxes, ownership, funding, and it by itself does not make your business succeed, but it does protect you while you build your business. So clean structure prevents an expensive cleanup that could come later. This module is really going to help you portionate or allocate protection for the stage that you are at. So what legal structure actually does, it clarifies expectations and it removes myths. The structure determines ownership, liability, and tax treatment. It'll affect how you issue equity and how investors evaluate you. It does not validate your idea, and it by itself will not eliminate the business risk, though structure can eliminate some risk that is more detailed and comes later on. But it by itself is not going to reduce the risk of your product succeeding or failing. It's a container, and then your execution still determines the outcomes. The trade-off, simplicity versus protection. Ultimately, you want flexibility. So every structure balances simplicity versus liability for protection versus flexibility. So those are kind of the three levers that we're playing with here. At an early stage, it's really hard to prioritize one of these versus another. You definitely need simplicity, right? You are not a lawyer. You certainly, you might be, right? I don't know who's watching this video, but chances are you are not a lawyer, or if you may not be a lawyer in all of the different specialties that you might need as a founder, which are a lot. You might need product help. You might need IP help. You might need, you might be involved in customer litigation or a vendor dispute, insurance. It could be taxes. It could be import and export. There are a lot of different fields of legal expertise, and you may need somebody in any of those fields. And generally speaking, that expertise does not come inexpensively. So you definitely want something that's going to be simple. You don't want to overcomplicate and have way too much structure for where you are in the business, but you really need that protection, right? You are also by yourself. You could be to come after you if maybe you have a vendor and they're making a part for you, and then you assemble it and then sell it. That part goes bad. Well, where's the exposure? Is it on you, or is it on the customer who used it inappropriately, or is it on the vendor that supplied that part? So there's a lot of different things that you want protection from, but you also want flexibility, right? The structure of your business, the way it is today versus the way it's going to be a year from now or 2 years from now. You may bring on other co-founders. You may bring on equity partners. You may bring on strategic partners. You're going to have agreements for all of those different types of partnerships, and the structure of your business needs to still be functional and work despite those agreements, investor situations. So
that's why those are kind of the three pieces that are most important: simplicity, protection, and flexibility. There's no one size fits all. This is very much about you. What stage are you at in business, and what is your business strategy? So choose the appropriate structure for you and your goals, not whatever the most impressive one to venture capitalists is, or whatever the case may be that you've seen on Shark Tank. So what are those structures? So one, the most simple, easy, is a sole proprietorship. That's me. I'm operating my own business, Stephen Mint Services. Super easy to set up. You don't really have to do a lot. Great, nice, simple. The downside, there's no liability protection. My personal assets are exposed. If I was selling cars as a sole proprietorship and that car broke down, then those people could come after me and my entire net worth and ruin me and my family and everything. So, that's certainly much higher risk. But if all you're doing is consulting, then the worst case scenario is that somebody says, "Oh, I didn't get much out of your consulting, so I'm just not going to continue my relationship with you." The next kind of step up is a little bit more complexity, but it's still pretty simple, and it has that nice balance of protection and simplicity that many early stage founders are looking for, without the additional expense that a very complex corporation would have. And that's called an LLC, a limited liability corporation. So that provides liability protection. It's relatively simple. Most people can set it up by themselves. You can go to your state websites. I think we have some links here on our page that'll take you to some easy ways to kind of set up some of these businesses. And that works really well for early revenue stage businesses. As long as you have clear operating agreements. That's the one thing. You want to have a really nice, clean, easy to understand. And it can be multiple pages. You want to have a cap table in there, but you want to make sure you have a really nice operating agreement with you and your partners, if applicable, partner or partners, depending on what your business is. And so that's kind of the next step up in complexity. And then finally, we've got corporations, and there's a couple of different type. There's an S corp or a C corp. C corps are pretty standard for backed companies. That's what private equity is going to be looking for. Oftentimes, those are incorporated in Delaware. There's definitely more administrative overhead. The reason that the venture capitalists and equity folks like them is because they're very clean in terms of and equity structure. The cap tables are generally more complex, and they're already pre-filled out for multiple rounds. There's kind of standard, raises that are happening at milestones, certain elevations and kickers and different things, and a lot of pre-existing law to support these types of companies, especially in Delaware and a few other states like that. So it becomes very attractive because people know what they're getting into, right? It's kind of a tried and true path. So the problem is those cost much more to set up. So if you're not looking and have no need to ever go get external funding, you probably don't want to set up a $5,000 or $10,000 corporate structure. All you're going to do is be selling lemonade, down the corner. That's why it's really important to understand kind of what your business is trying to do and how it's structured before getting into the type of business and then actually spending the money to set it up that way. So matching business structure to business reality. We kind of talked about that, but your structure needs to align with your business model, your pricing logic, your funding goals, your strategy, and all of the things that we've been working on over the previous 6 modules. And so basing your risk exposure and your growth intent is really how you should choose structure. Now, here in the AI era, some of the things to consider are, if you're going to be using AI-enabled tools, you're going to want to clarify who owns that code, who owns that data. You want to formalize and ownership in those agreements, decide what is reusable versus what your client owns or your vendor owns. Is going to lower your costs, but it also increases the importance of establishing that intellectual property clarity and what that structure is going to be. And then if you're either your feasibility of your business or the defensibility of your IP depends on the data or those workflows, you really want to formalize that ownership early. That becomes really pertinent and essentially can become source data for you in this new age. Another thing that you want to sure you're paying some attention to is founder agreements and general governance. So we talked earlier about an operating agreement and a cap table. So those are certainly things that should be included, especially if you have a co-founder. So you know, co-founder agreements cover things like how much equity does one partner have? What are some of the milestones that need to be hit in order to earn that equity? What are the salaries and what are the roles and responsibilities associated with those salaries? You might cover things in the cap table like how much money was invested by each party and what sort of ownership rights did that earn them, sense of either equity or units. Another trap with a lot of investors is to start talking about, you know, percentages. Those are going to change an awful lot over time. So a lot of people, myself included, prefer to talk about the number of units or shares depending on what your configuration is. So in a corporate equity structure, you're going to have shares that have been issued, but in a LLC, you might just have units, right? There might be 100 units. And if it's just you and your co-founder, maybe each of you have 50 units, or maybe it's a 70-30 split, depending on what you guys have negotiated and agreed to. And so why might one partner have more equity than the other? Well, there's really two main reasons. Who's putting more into it? And then who actually let me say that a different way. Who's putting more day-to-day into it, right? Time, materials, energy, resources of management, labor. And then the other side of it is who's putting actual cash into it. And they say cash is king. So cash certainly matters a lot in the actual, but the time and energy does as well, especially in a startup where you're building from scratch. So that's negotiation that you and your co-founder will have to determine, you know, and again, this is where you can use negotiation. Maybe equity is more important to one person, time is more important to the other, maybe cash is equally important to both, right? So there's an opportunity to really figure out what works best for you there. Okay, so what do you do and when do you do it? So right now, I would say, hey, take 2 minutes. You're going to, what is this section? Let me see this. Yes, okay. So you're going to do this right now. This should only take a couple of minutes. That's not how we're doing this. Let me back up. Okay. So what do you do? So now you understand kind of, yeah, let me back up here. So now we're moving in from founder agreements and governance. So action item time. What do we actually do and when do we do it? Well, what you should do now, and when I say now, these are the things you're doing in the next week, 2 weeks, however long it takes. But you're focusing that, you know, in your next 30 days, kind of your sprint, this is the stuff that you're doing right now. You're going to choose a name if you haven't done that yet, both for your company and or your product or service. And you're going to check availability. You're going to perform a basic freedom to operate check. And we'll get more into that later. But basically, initially what you're going to do is you're going to go to your state database and you're going to do a quick search to see if anything, not just, and you don't want to just check the exact same name, but, you know, check different spellings, different versions. And you're going to check website availability, social handles, the state database, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, their trademark search. And once you have cleared everything, then you can move forward to the next step. But that can take a little bit of time. I promise you, it could be harder than you think. Your first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names, they may be taken. And I've had to do that for a lot of companies where we end up on, you know, maybe our 10th choice. So just, hey, roll with the punches on that. But it is really important to get that clear before you start spending a lot of time and money investing on developing, you know, your logos and your branding and your kits and all these different things. And you realize, oh man, I can't get that Instagram handle. Well, guess what? That's really going to severely limit how much value you can create for your business. Okay, once you've got cleared on all that, then you can file your formation documents. You'll get an EIN. And what an EIN is essentially it's your social security number for your business. It is the identification number at the federal level And that sometimes can take a couple of weeks to get, but once you do, then you can open up a separate business banking account. And those are kind of the things that you need to do to begin to establish credibility and legitimacy as a business. And I think we've, again, got some links down below on where to go and do those things. But again, let's cover those one more time. So it's your website, it's your social handles, right? So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, whatever makes sense for your business, your state and industry databases, as well as the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office search. And then you'll end up getting an EIN and a bank account. The next thing that you'll do after all that is done is you're going to register for sales tax if necessary. So you'll set up your payroll accounts if you're going to be hiring folks. You're going to get any required licenses. You're going to need to go and get insurance, set up your bookkeeping systems. Maybe you're using QuickBooks, maybe you're using Xero. There's a couple of different versions of what you can use for that. But you want to make sure you're getting all of your financials in order and set up. That's not something that you want to wait till later on, and you'll end up paying a ton in late fees and causing all sorts of problems with your business. The next thing that you're going to do after that is you're going to start to build out your structure depending on if you need funding or not. So for example, if you're going to go after equity funding, you're going to need to have a data room. So you're going to, and what's involved in a data room, essentially it's an online drive folder repository with all of your important stuff. So it's got all your corporate paperwork, it's got your operating agreements, your cap tables, your business strategy, all of your IP, basically everything that we've been building over the past weeks as you've been doing these modules, all needs to live in a very structured and formatted and easy to understand way. And I think we've got some example links on my resources page where you can find some examples of what data rooms look like. Then let's see, if you're and let's say you're doing friends and family and you're going to go try and do some debt fundraising, or you're going to go after some grants or apply for different awards, then you might be putting together your pitch deck and your financial materials and all that kind of stuff. So that'll come in a couple more modules. The other things to look at are if you're going to have a board. Are you going to have a strategic board of advisors or a formal board governance that you're going to do either your bi-monthly meetings where you're going to have your formalized meeting minutes, and those would all go into your data room as well. So you got to kind of set up what your structure for your company is going to be. Again, only add complexity when scale requires it. If you are a solo entrepreneur that is going to have one consulting client, you don't necessarily need to do all of this. But if you're operating a $10 million Series A and you've already got 15 employees, then you're probably doing even more than this, right? So it really kind of depends where you are, but add that complexity as required by scale. So what are some of the common legal mistakes? Delaying the formation too long. If you've already got clients and you're processing funds and you haven't formalized your business, you might be operating illegally, right? So these are things that you want to take a look at. Mixing your personal and business finances, that can get really tricky to resolve later on, especially if you've got multiple businesses or companies that you're working with or for. Skipping founder agreements, that's a tough one. The value of the handshake is not what it used to be. You want everything in writing. You want to make sure that both parties have signed. You don't want to be ending up fighting with your co-founder about the percentage of equity 2 years into this when you're blowing up. Same thing with IP. Don't ignore the IP assignment. You want vesting schedules, vesting agreements, for anything that's investor related, and same thing on the IP side. You're going to want to have IP assignments for in all of your agreements. Where do those belong? Who owns the IP? As you're creating IP, you're creating value. Okay, so now we're going to be moving forward to module 8, and that's where structure affects funding eligibility. What the hell am I talking about here? This makes no sense. What is module 8? Ooh. Funding pathways is module 8. Okay, I feel like I already talked a lot about this, but again, I feel like I've already talked about this. Structure affects funding eligibility. Venture capitalists require SEQ. We talked about that. Lenders require clean documentation. In summary, yeah, legal structure shapes your funding options. So make sure you're picking and setting the correct structure ahead and that your documentation is clean and organized. Okay. Yeah, covered. Okay. Next, let's get into actually getting into some of these decision-making tools that we have. So there's a checklist that's going to help you map your business model to the right structure. It'll help you identify what should be done now versus later, and ultimately prepare you for the funding conversations that may be to come. Clarity today prevents cleanup tomorrow. This module helps you build legal infrastructure that protects you without slowing you down. You should now understand when to form, what to file, how to protect IP and ownership, and how structure connects to funding. Next, we'll explore funding pathways, whether you bootstrap, borrow, or raise capital, and how to choose intentionally. See you there.